Defining stress. In order to gain a greater understanding of stress and therefore more effectively deal with it, it's obviously necessary to first define it. The most valid, credible, and respectable definition of stress that has been accepted by experts worldwide is stress, the confusion created when the mind overrides the body's basic desire to choke the living daylights out of somebody who desperately needs it. Okay, maybe this isn't the most valid or credible definition of stress, but can you relate to this definition? Unfortunately, there's not one standard definition of stress because the term stress is not really a useful term for scientists because it's a highly subjective concept. In other words, what constitutes stress for one person may not be stressful for another. It's been said that stress is one of those words that everyone knows the meaning of, but no one can define. When you initially hear the word stress, several thoughts or feelings probably come to mind fairly quickly and easily. We all know how it feels to be stressed, and we can all easily identify stressors. Finances, meeting deadlines, getting into arguments, traffic, losing your car keys or cell phone, being in debt, being in a bad relationship, hating your job, etc. But it might be a bit more difficult and take a little bit longer to come up with an actual definition of it. Nevertheless, take a look at these definitions. Stress is any event or situation that brings us out of homeostasis. Homeostasis refers to maintaining internal equilibrium. So basically, homeostasis is when your body is functioning normally and all is well physically. Internal equilibrium usually refers to our physiological state. The concept of equilibrium also applies to our psychological state. Emotional homeostasis is when your emotional health and well-being are quote-unquote normal and all is well emotionally. Stress is any outside force or event that has an effect on our mind or body. This definition implies that stress affects us both physically and psychologically. Stress is the nonspecific response of the body to any demand for change. This definition implies the body is altered as a result from encountering a situation that causes a change or brings us out of equilibrium. Stress is the rate of wear and tear on the body. This definition implies that stress negatively affects our physiology. Stress is the rate of wear and tear on the mind. This definition implies that stress negatively affects our psychology. Stress is physical, mental, or emotional strain or tension. Again, stress is associated with physical and emotional aspects. Stress is an organism's total response to environmental demands or pressures. This definition implies that stressors are external strains or events that affect us. Stress is the condition or a feeling that occurs when a person perceives that demands exceed the personal and social resources the individual is able to mobilize. In other words, you feel like you just can't handle the stressor. It's too big for you. This implies that perception plays a role in whether or not we feel stressed. Stress is the spice of life. This definition has a positive connotation and implies that stress can actually be good for you. When asked how do you define stress, check out some responses from others. Components of stress. Whenever asked what stress is, most people usually identify a stressor, of which I provided several examples just a minute ago. However, based on the definition I provided, as well as the definitions provided by former students, stress involves 1. A stressor or some sort of demand, pressure, negative situation or event. 2. Our perception of or thoughts about that stressor. 3. An emotional reaction. 4, sometimes a behavioral reaction, and 5, a physiological reaction. So the term stress involves much more than simply a stressor and refers to a chain reaction involving multiple components affecting us physically, emotionally, and behaviorally. Stress is defined by its components. In order to decrease stress levels and thereby improve our quality of life, it's important to tackle these components. You're going to learn to decrease or even eliminate stressors with coping techniques, particularly creative problem solving. You're going to learn to alter your perceptions, which thereby alters your emotions, with the coping techniques as well, particularly with the cognitive restructuring techniques. You're going to learn to control your behavioral reactions and physiological reactions with the relaxation technique. The supplemental video for this lecture is entitled Effects of Stress and is a super quick cartoon just over a minute. Take note of what they say about what stress does to your appearance and your memory. Key points. Stress is a difficult word to define because what's stressful for one person may not be stressful for another. However, most definitions that have been proposed involve a stressor, our thoughts or perceptions about that stressor, emotional reactions, behavioral reactions, and physical reactions. And that's it for this lecture.